Tracking down the Patriarch letter or agreement, I have some documents, but I'm not yet in a position to make them available, but I hope to be able to. Been produced, but we'll have to check further on that. The second point is, in light of the accused expressions of objection about the scope of his questioning, may I just draw to the court's attention not only that your order permitted him to cross-examine on the basis of the scope identified by Annex A, which is the larger rather than the smaller version of the document, of the statement of the witness, but it also allowed the accused and the amici to seek broader scope of cross-examination via a procedure that they could adopt. And neither the accused nor the amici has taken the opportunity of that procedure.
Well, yes, Your Honour, can I make a few observations, because it's obviously important, as there is a big issue behind this witness that I think everyone in the court is aware of. The order of the court, I believe, of the 30th of October, did confine cross-examination to material in Annex A. I have been tracking Annex A, which is a statement served on me on the 3rd of November, and although slightly wider than the present statement we have, it is the same issues that the witness has dealt with in direct examination this morning that is before the court. It doesn't deal with the NATO bombing campaign. And so, to all intents and purposes, the issues are the same. One of the big problems was the belief, of course, that this book was going to be exhibited. And if the book had been exhibited, it, of course, dealt with the NATO bombing campaign, and the accused would have been able to deal with those issues that arise within the book. That has not happened. And of course, I believe the situation has been that he would have prepared a great deal of his cross-examination on that basis, because that was the belief of all parties until very recently, having been alerted to an issue on Friday as to whether the book would be exhibited or not. And so in many respects, the accused has approached this witness from a particular way which, it seems, has been changed at a very late stage. And of course, that has caused him difficulties with his case strategy.
Certainly had never understood that. There was no reference to the book in the order which we had made. And while it is true that there was talk about the book, we had never been asked, I may be wrong about this, to order its being exhibited. And what I had understood was that the prosecution would seek to rely on those parts of the book which supported the evidence, which is in fact what effectively has happened, because the passages to which they referred are essentially the same as in the evidence. And of course, in those circumstances, for the reasons which we've given, we haven't admitted the book, it adding nothing. But yes, I mean, that may explain why there's been no application. You will, of course, have the period overnight to consider the position.
The history of it is quite important, because when we started with this witness and the Rule 70 issues, the book was served by the prosecution, and it looked at that stage, and we've been through various other stages since, but it looked at the original stage that was going to be the basis of testimony, because we've been approaching witnesses in a very different way recently from how we did when we started the trial. And there's been a situation where Rule 89F could have been used in relation to the book, and that be the basis of the testimony. In many respects, I had originally expected that, although of course I appreciated things were changing as we moved further and closer to this witness's testimony. But it may well be that that was not something that the accused had appreciated.
Very well.
And, Your Honour, I can actually sort out the point about the Patriarch Agreement straight away. We don't have a copy of the agreement itself, or letter itself, that we can produce for you, but a document 469 tab 20 produced by Lilich is the stenographic record of one of the two meetings held at Dobanovsky, this one on the 30th of August of 1995, and on page 16 of 19 of that document, the agreement is set out, and you can therefore find the terms of the agreement there. And if the accused wishes to find it, that's where he can find it for the time being.
It may be helpful if somebody have the copy available for tomorrow.
Here now.
We are going to have a copy of this document, and there is this reference to it, Exhibit 469, tab 20, and there should be a copy for the witness.
In English, the agreement starts at page 16 of 19. In the BCS version, it starts at page 14 at the top. The accused would find that helpful.
Page 16 in the English, we can find this reference, can we?
Agreement.
Paragraph 2 is the...
I've got the showed copy. Yeah, I see it.
Microphone, please, Your Honour.
All right. Date 30th of August 1995.
The date of the agreement is set out on page 16.
Microphone, please, Mr. Nice.
Thank you. The date of the agreement is said to be on the 29th of August, if you look at 3 lines above the word agreement, towards the foot of page 16 of the document.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Milosevic, we now have that document in front of us, and the witness has a copy, the General has a copy. If you want to ask any further questions about that. Otherwise, we will continue until 2 o'clock, which means another hour for your cross-examination, hour and a bit. Yes.
Pretpostavljam da ću i sutra imati neko...
I assume I'll have some time tomorrow as well for my cross-examination, Mr. May.
We will have some time tomorrow.
Prvo razjasnimo.
Let us first clear up one particular point. A moment ago, Mr. Kay said that by instructions issued on Friday, you specified the scope of the cross-examination or the examination or the testimony of this witness. I have received no document to that effect on Friday.
It wasn't an order. It was the order, it's the written order, which has already been referred to. That's the original order. There was some discussion on Friday, or certainly one morning, it may not even have been Friday, there was some discussion of the admissibility or how much of the book should be admitted or not. That was only the point. There was no order. Now let us continue.
Gospodine May,
Mr. May, when this witness's testimony was announced, the opposite side disclosed his book to me, which is called Waging Modern War. Therefore, the fact that the side opposite provided me with a document, I assumed, and it is only logical for anyone to assume, that that will serve as the basis for the testimony of this witness and his cross-examination. However, just now you have prohibited me from asking him a single question about a war of which this witness was in command against Yugoslavia.
Going over this again, the order was issued on the 30th of October. It was in writing, and it made quite plain the scope of the examination. Now let us continue with the examination now.
But even then, on the 30th of October, the book was not excluded. It was not excluded. On the contrary, the book was produced as a basis for the testimony of this witness. You didn't exclude the book on the 30th of October.
What was referred to in the summary were possible extracts, and that was all. And in fact, those extracts, as we've just heard, are substantially the evidence which General Clark has given. Now, if you want to spend your time usefully, you should continue with your cross-examination.
I will certainly continue. That's not a problem. General Clark, since a moment ago we were discussing a matter you know nothing about, that is the readiness of the Serb side in Bosnia and Herzegovina to give up part of the territory it controlled. Will you please place in front of you a map, which is not any division map, but it is an ethnic map based on the 1991 census, and you will see that most of the territory, in fact, belongs to the Serbs on the basis of this map. So my question to you is, are you aware that predominantly, I'm not saying altogether, that the Serbs held territories that belong to them or not? So will you please put this map on the Elmo?
Yes, this is the map which has already been produced several times. I've been reminded of the number. It's got a D number. Yes, we'll get the number in due course. Yes, what is it that you want the witness to deal with?
It's D215. 250.
That's correct, Your Honor.
I should just like to ask the witness to tell us whether this was roughly the land controlled by the Serbs, and that they in fact controlled mostly their own territory because it belonged to them and because they were the majority population in those areas.
Well, Your Honor, I'm not familiar with the method that was used to produce the census. I have seen census results, but since we're talking about events that occurred before the period on which I testified, then I think it's fair to point out the fact that during this period, and the area in which the Serbs were in control included areas such as Banja Luka, which had very large non-Serb populations which were driven out. We know that for a fact. All of this was relevant. It was all important background. Some of these camps were set up in this area that's not blue but pink on this map. And this area in here, there were substantial portions of non-Serbs, also up here around Brčko and in the surrounding area in the Posavina corridor, also over in here. So I don't understand the thrust of the accused's question. But if it gets into the point about the specific division of territories, then I think it's clear that if one looked at the territory in '94 that was controlled by the Serbs, one would have to conclude that non-Serb populations had been driven out and confined. And if one's concerned with the percentages of the land that are controlled, then one would have to say the percentages were not in accordance with the division of the population.
Što tvrdite, generalne
Are you claiming, General Clark, that the non-Serbs were detained in camps? Do you have any idea how many such non-Serbs were in camps?
za takvu tvrdnju morate da imate
If you make such a claim, then I assume you base it on some figures.
Your Honor, I'm only trying to discuss the issue of the map. I've already presented the testimony as requested. I can certainly produce additional figures that would give estimates of the numbers of people detained, the locations of the camps, and so forth. I don't have those in my memory. They're not in the line of my direct performance of duties. At the time, I wasn't responsible for this part of for these negotiations, but I'm happy to engage in a broader debate if that's the wishes of the court.
Have you finished with the plan now? Finished with the map?
Da, možete da je sklonite.
Yes, you can remove it. I assume it speaks for itself.
We will take it back, and it can go back to the accused. In fact, the registry was right about the map. That map hasn't been produced, according to my recollection. It was the Sarajevo map, which we produced a similar one. But maybe we're going to get something else coming up. Yes.
Da se nakratko vratim
Let me briefly go back to what General Clark referred to as the Patriarch's letter. I assume the translation is correct. It says minutes or record from a meeting of the highest political and military leaders of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and Republika Srpska, held on the 29th of August 1995 at the Yugoslav Army residence in Dobanovci. That is the small hunting lodge that General Clark mentioned. So, it says here, I hope one can see clearly from this document how the meeting developed and evolved, and how long the explanations went on for regarding the need for an agreement to be drafted between Yugoslavia and Republika Srpska in relation to the peace negotiations. I should like to read out what it says here on page 16 of the English version, from which it can clearly be seen that there are two sides here endeavoring to define their common interest in achieving peace. And it says here, at a joint meeting of the leadership of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, and then in brackets, present, the President of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Zoran Liglic, the President of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic, the President of Montenegro, Momir Bulatovic, the President of the Federal Government, Dr. Radoje Kontić, Federal Defense Minister Pavle Bulatovic, and the Yugoslav Army General Chief of Staff, Colonel General Momčilo Perišić, and of the Republic of Srpska, and then again in brackets, present, President of the Republic of Srpska, Dr. Radovan Karadžić, Vice Presidents, Dr. Nikola Koljevic and Dr. Biljana Plavšić, President of the Assembly of Republika Srpska, Momčilo Krajišić, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Srpska, Dušan Kozić, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Aleksa Buha, the Commander of the Main Staff of Republika Srpska, Colonel General Ratko Mladić, with General Zdravko Tolimir, Milan Gvero, and George Djukic. So it is stated that this was a meeting held between these two delegations and that the meeting was also attended, as it says clearly here, by the Patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church, His Eminence Pavle, and Bishop Irinej Bulović.
His Eminence Pavle and Bishop Irinej. I onda je postignut sljedeći.
And then it says the following agreement was reached. So it is no letter by the Patriarch, but the presence of the Patriarch and Bishop Irinej at a meeting between delegations of the Republic of Yugoslavia and the Republic of Srpska, represented on a parity basis, including the highest level political and military leaderships. And then it says in paragraph 1, the leadership of Republika Srpska is in agreement with the complete coordination of its approach to the peace process with the leadership of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in the interests of peace. So it means that agreement was reached to coordinate the approach rather than any kind of alchemistry of mine. So the point was in achieving a unified approach with the aim of achieving peace. Is that clear, General?
Your Honor, I've seen the so-called Patriarch letter before. I understand what it provided. I've not seen this full package before. But the Patriarch letter is clear, and it gives the accused the final vote and control over the delegation.
Da, to je bilo moje insistiranje.
Yes. I insisted because the Van Zoen Plan of 1993 fell through because our authority from Serbia and the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, the President of Yugoslavia, Ćosić, was there, the President of Montenegro, Bulatović, myself, and the Greek Prime Minister, Mitsotakis, we did not manage to convince them.
General Clark can't deal with what you decided amongst yourselves. You can give evidence about it in due course. We can all read this document. Is there anything else you want to ask the General about it?
Da li je jasno?
Is it clear that it was stated in this document that Republika Srpska would delegate 3 members to the 6-member delegation, which will, headed by Slobodan Milošević, President of Serbia, will conduct the negotiations on a comprehensive peace agreement for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then the members are listed. And it is also stated that the delegation is authorized to sign the peace agreement on behalf of Republika Srpska, the part of it relating to Republika Srpska, with the obligation that the achieved agreement should be strictly and consistently complied with. Is that right, General Clark?
Well, Your Honor, I think the Patriarch letter speaks for itself. I mean, it has it there in writing. Everyone can read it. I think the broader issue that's being raised is the role of the accused and of Yugoslavia in this conflict. And as an observer of this from the outside and as someone who had reliable sources to depend on, what I viewed was that this side had, at this point in 1995, suffered a grievous strategic setback, and they had recognized that with the developments, the military developments on the ground, that they were in danger of defeat on the ground. And therefore, the best tactical course was to accept the general outlines of the peace proposal that the United States delegation was bringing. To say that is to say nothing about their motivations, their previous participation in efforts of war and peace and so forth. It's simply this is simply a reflection, and I believe this Patriarch letter is simply, it's a tactical document that reflects the position that they found themselves in at the time.
Dobro, Generale Clark.
Very well, General Clark. You insist on calling this the Patriarch's letter, though it is quite clear that it's an agreement between Republika Srpska and the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which the Patriarch gave his blessing to only, and signed it, as well as Bishop Irine, because it says here, on behalf of the Republic of Srpska and on behalf of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. And then in paragraph 3, it says, the leadership of Republika Srpska agrees that binding decisions for the delegation in relation to the peace plan be made by the delegation at a plenary session based on a majority of votes. In the event of an equal number of votes, the vote of President Slobodan Milosevic would be decisive. Is that clear, General? Surely that's clear.
Je li to vama logično?
Is it logical to you, in view of the fact that I was, after all, the most senior person in that delegation?
Your Honor, I think the agreement speaks for itself. It's very clear what this agreement says. It's also clear what it was in response to. There's never been any issue about this. It was simply referred to colloquially by the U.S. delegation as the so-called Patriarch letter. We understood exactly what it was, that it was an agreement, and that it did give, if the terms of the agreement were followed, it gave the accused the final word in the discussions during the shuttle diplomacy and subsequently at Dayton.
Dobro, Generale Clark.
Very well, General Clark. The fact that I had the final word, surely that was decisive for the Dayton Agreement to be signed, wasn't it, or not?
Your Honor, it was very clear to me during the process of negotiating the Dayton Agreement that the accused was very much in charge of the delegation and that he had the final say. It wasn't the accused alone that made the agreement at Dayton possible. That was a result of work by several different parties, but it was clear that the accused did have effective direction, control over his delegation, including the members from the Serb portion of Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Dobro, je li to imalo presudan značaj?
Was this of decisive significance in achieving the Dayton Agreement, General Clark? As a participant in the negotiations, can you deny that?
Your Honor, as I testified, when I had difficulties with the Bosnian Serbs, I went to the accused, who then was able to insist, I suppose, that they accept whatever it was that I was proposing.
Dobro, sporazum je, valjda nećemo ni to dovoditi u
Surely we're not going to call in question the fact that the agreement was reached in Dayton, signed there, and after that in Paris again. Surely that is not at issue, at least.
Your Honor, that is not at issue, nor is the role of the accused at issue.
Dobro, Generale Clark.
Very well, General Clark. That's fine.
Pošto ste uglavnom
Since, in your examination in chief,
citirali
you quoted
da sam rekao
me as having told you
da ste vi ratni zločinac.
that you were a war criminal. Am I quoting what you said, General Clark, correctly?
I recall you're saying that I would be the war criminal or that I was a war criminal. Yes. That was in the meeting that we had in Bely Dvor in January of 1999.
A dobro, da li se, to je tačno da sam rekao.
That is quite true that I said that you would be a war criminal if you attacked Yugoslavia. That is quite true. I said to you, you will be a war criminal if you attack Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia is a sovereign state and you have no right to intervene militarily in Yugoslavia. Is that right, General Clark?
Your Honor, I don't recall all of the qualifications. I recall the accused becoming very angry, red in the face, and making accusations. That's what I recall, and that's what I testified to.
Dakle, vi ste najavljivali bombardovanje.
So you were heralding a NATO bombardment, and I said that you did not have the right to bomb a sovereign state, and that if you did that, you would be a war criminal. Is that right, General Clark?
The witness has answered the question. No need to repeat it.
Dobro.
All right.
Smatrate da ste vi ratni zločinac.
Do you think that you are a war criminal, General Clark?
It's not a proper question.
Dobro, ako nije korektno.
All right. If it's not a proper question, then I'm going to put some other questions.
Evo, stavite ovu fotografiju na Elmo pa mi recite.
Could you put this photograph on the Elmo?
What's the photograph about? What is it of?
Na fotografiji je general
The photograph depicts General Clark,
zajedno sa Hašimom,
together with Hashim Thaci, Agim Cheku,
generalom Jacksonom i
General Jackson, and Kushner.
Tari.
They're like the musketeers, with their hands all together.
It doesn't arise from your examination or the examination in chief of the witness or his statement.
Gospodine May,
Mr. May,
svedok je uglavnom ispitivan
during the examination in chief, the witness said, when quoting me, and I confirmed that I said to him that he would be a war criminal if he attacked Yugoslavia. I wish to show him proof of the fact that what I said to him was correct. So I have the right.
You could ask him about the conversation because that was something which the witness dealt with in chief and in his statement. You've asked him about the conversation, you've got the answer. The substance of your allegations, such as they are, is neither here nor there. All we are concerned with is the fact that you made these allegations, if there's any significance in it. Now, don't waste your time arguing about these matters.
Gospodine May,
Mr. May, do I not have the right to put a question to him in relation to what he himself stated? That I had said to him that he would be a war criminal. Don't I have the right to ask him about the consequences of what he did afterwards?
No, and you've heard the reasons. You know how far you're allowed to go and how far you aren't. And this goes beyond it. If it's a way to try and get round the ruling, which I suspect it is, it will not be successful. Now, the witness has answered the question. He said you did make that allegation for what it's worth, but doesn't remember what qualifications there were. Now, we can't take it any further. All you can ask him about is the conversation itself.
znači mogu da mu postavim
Oh,
pitanje.
so I can ask him about the conversation, but I cannot ask him about the content and meaning of that conversation? Is that what you're trying to say?
That's right, particularly these sort of allegations which you're anxious to pursue.
A u tome I jeste stvar, gospodine.
Well, that's the point, Mr. May. This entire farce serves that purpose, to cover up the crime committed against Yugoslavia by...
We don't want political speeches now. We're far too advanced in this trial to listen to this.
Dobro, generale Clark.
All right, General Clark. Do you think, in view of your military training and education, the high position you held in the Army of the United States and in NATO, that the killing of civilians, the bombing of...
Now, you know quite well that this is not the sort of question the witness is dealing with. We've told you before you were asking questions which you were perfectly permitted to ask before the adjournment. I suggest you return to that.
Dakle, vi mi ne dozvoljavate ni jedno.
So you are not allowing me to put a single question in relation to the crimes that this witness committed against my country?
No, you know quite well that these sort of questions are not permitted. These sort of allegations which you make are not matters which can be debated now, or indeed at any time probably in this trial, unless you show the relevance of it. But it's certainly not relevant to this evidence. This kind of allegation does not assist anybody.
Dobro, pošto vi kažete sada, gospodine.
All right. Since you've said just now, Mr. May, that this cannot be discussed here, I have here with me the final report that a commission established to look into the NATO campaign against Yugoslavia, and this commission worked for the prosecution.
You're wasting your own time. It's very limited. You know quite well what your questioning is limited to. You must return to it, or this cross-examination will stop. It's a matter for you whether you want the cross-examination to stop or not. Now you will go back to what the witness gave evidence about in chief, or this cross-examination will be brought to an end.
Dobro, gospodine May.
All right, Mr. May.
Vi mene ograničavate na neke mrvice.
You are restricting me to mere crumbles as far as the questioning of this witness is concerned, but in accordance with what he was explaining here, I will try to put some other questions to him.
Jel mogu da nastavim, gospodine May?
May I proceed, Mr. May?
Yes, half an hour ago, it could have gone on.
Generale Clark,
General Clark,
vi ste maločas objašnjavali
a short while ago, you explained
ovaj dokument
this
na koji sam
document
stavio potpis.
that I affixed my signature to as well, at the insistence of General Naumann and yourself, as you had explained it.
Kazati na samom dokumentu
Now I'm going to show you, by using the document itself, that you've twisted the facts in this respect too. This is
66673.
a document that bears one of your ERN numbers, 0767673. and it's entitled Record from the Meeting held on the 25th of October 1998 in Belgrade.
That one is. It's one nice which you disclosed, is it?
Microphone.
Exhibit previously tendered 94 tab 3. And I think we've got courtesy copies. I hope you have.
We have it. Yes, we have it.
Dakle, zapisnik sa sastanka
So, record of meeting held in Belgrade on the 25th of October 1998.
svega 3 tačke.
It has only 3 items.
Prvo je tačka.
Item 1
Nabraja se ko je prisustvovao sastanku.
refers to all the people who attended the meeting. Milan Milutinovic, President of the Republic of Serbia; Nikola Shajinovic, Vice Premier of the Federal Government of the FRY; Colonel General Momčilo Perišić, Chief of the General Staff of the Yugoslav Army, and so on and so forth, and Colonel General Vlastimir Đorđević, the members of their delegation, then the NATO military authorities, General Naumann, Chairman of the Military Committee, General Clark, Supreme Allied Commander Europe, and their delegations.
Dakle, je li jasno da ja uopće
So,
nisam prisustvovao tom
isn't it clear that I myself did not attend the meeting at all? You discussed specific matters during that meeting. I'm not a participant in the meeting. Isn't that right, General Clark?
tako ili ne?
Is that right or is that not right?
Your Honor, the accused is misrepresenting the meeting. We began the meeting with the accused. We dealt with the substance that was to be worked. The accused reviewed and approved the agreement in every detail, not the first 3 paragraphs, which is the record of the meeting, but the subsequent attached document, which is marked 0076667,
General Clark, please.
which was the document, Your Honor, that the attached memorandum referred to. This is the document that was reviewed in detail and approved by the accused. It's the document that he had some objections to, that we changed in accordance with his objections, and that we worked together on throughout the night of the 24th of October, and that then he signed this cover sheet to the document on the 25th of October. So this cover sheet applies to the statement that it's attached to, which is marked as a separate document, but in fact, it is the same document.
Generale Clark,
General Clark,
ćemo i na sadržinu toga
we'll get to the content too. And that suits me fine, to get to the content of the document too. But isn't it clear from the document itself, the document that was signed, that you and Naumann attended the meeting together with your staff, and on the other side you had the President of the Republic of Serbia, Milutinovic, then Shajinovic, Perišić, and Đorđević.
vi ste razmatrali sve
So
konkretne stvari,
you discussed all these particular matters at that meeting, and it is stated that the purpose of the meeting was to discuss specific steps to be taken to achieve full compliance by the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia with the requirements of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1199. And item 3 says, the position of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and Serbian authorities is reflected in the attached statement. The NATO military representatives took note of the statement.
ovaj zapisnik potpisuju
And then this record is signed
Jugoslavije,
on behalf of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Deputy Prime Minister Shajinovic, on behalf of the Republic of Serbia, General Đorđević, and on behalf of NATO, you and Naumann. And I, as an expression of my goodwill, not as a response of any kind of compulsion on your part, because you couldn't have forced me to do that, I put my signature there in order to confirm that that is the way it was. Namely, that I was aware of this and that I supported this record that you had compiled together. So we're not discussing my signature here in terms of it being missing. I was not at the meeting. Afterwards, I signed the document here on the side, and I confirmed in this way that I agreed with it as an expression of my goodwill.
You must come to a question. You've been allowed to go on to explain your position. Now you must come to a question.
Dobro, je li jasno da ja na tom vašem sastanku
Well, isn't it clear that I did not attend that meeting of yours? And isn't it clear that I signed this as an expression of my own goodwill in order to show that I agree with what you had agreed upon and signed? Is that right or is that not right, General Clark?
Your Honor, the accused was in charge of the government and all the activities that were going on inside Serbia, including inside Kosovo.
General Clark.
Let the witness finish.
When I and General Naumann went down there, we saw the accused first. He asked us to work the details with his military people. They said we had to come back. He was the only man who could produce such an agreement. We did come back to him. He did consent to it. He then said, please go back, write up the statement. We then brought the statement to him that morning of the 25th, and he then went over it line by line. It represented him. In fact, this signature page was further proof of his artifice. It was in motivation, I believed, duplicitous. It was an effort by the accused to wriggle out from his responsibilities to living up to the substance of the statement. This was his statement that was to be presented to the NATO authorities in order to not have the UN Security Council Resolution 1199 enforced by NATO military action. We were carrying his statement back to the NATO Council, and it was his statement, and it was for that reason that I insisted that he sign that statement, precisely to prevent the kinds of efforts that we're seeing this morning to characterize his presence as sort of perfunctory or goodwill, when in fact he was involved in approving the details of this statement and responsible for the compliance with it.
Generale Clark,
General Clark. You've missed the target completely when giving this explanation. I am not bringing into question at all that I agreed upon what you had been doing all night. As you said, that you worked out this agreement, I had a look at it, and I agreed with it. But the document itself states that it was signed by the participants in the meeting itself, and that I subsequently supported it, of course, and that is not being challenged in any way. But what you mentioned just now was that you informed NATO, I can't remember the exact words that you used, not to enforce Resolution 1199 by force. Tell me, where is it in Resolution 1199 that you have any grounds in order to resort to force?
odgovorite mi na to.
Answer that question.
Your Honor, this is the basic issue that I came to see the accused with on the 20th of October. Under UN Security Council Resolution 1199, Chapter 7, Use of All Necessary Means, I delivered the threat to the accused that if he didn't cease his actions, pull back his forces, and comply, that NATO would take action. This document was an effort to demonstrate the specifics by which Serbia would take action to comply with UN Security Council Resolution 1199. And as such, it required the solution of the accused, who was the head of the government in Yugoslavia and in overall charge of what was going on in Kosovo.
General Clark,
General Clark, answer my question. Where does Resolution 1199 authorize you to use force? Are you claiming that you have a Security Council resolution on the basis of which you waged war against Yugoslavia? Is that your assertion?
Your Honor, the accused brought to a state of acute crisis the humanitarian situation in the province of Kosovo. 350 to 400,000.
General, I'm asking you about.
No. Let witnesses explain. The general's explaining the position.
350 to 400,000 inhabitants were driven from their homes. They were forced to live in the woods. People perished in the extreme conditions outdoors. Artillery and heavy weapons were used against unarmed civilians. Key elements, including families, were eliminated during this period. In response to this, the UN Security Council resolution did direct that humanitarian efforts be made. It authorized such efforts under UN Security Council Resolution 1199. Acting together, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization issued to Serbia an activation order. It issued the activation order to its forces. It was to be applied against Serbia. The accused understands this very well. This is what he wanted to have lifted in the 15 October meeting. It was operative in bringing about a relief of the humanitarian situation, the crisis that he himself had directed to be caused by the activities of police and military forces in Kosovo against an essentially unarmed set of inhabitants in that province, the majority inhabitants in that province. So the NATO action was constructive and in pursuit of a peaceful settlement of the issues there to enable the population to return to their homes. What was at issue here was whether or not the Serb forces and police would be reduced in compliance with the UN instructions, or whether the accused and the elements of his chain of command would maintain excessive force in the province to use it, and to use it directly and in intimidation against the inhabitants.
General, it is not necessary for you to make speeches in response to questions that relate to documents. You said that you were authorized by Resolution 1199 to use force. I claim that that is not true, because there is no Security Council resolution for that. You waged an illegal war. Where does it say in Resolution 1199 that you were authorized to use force? Don't make a speech about various false...
Milosevic, it's a fault with which you're familiar. And were the witness to make speeches, he would be stopped. But he's not. He's answering the questions. Now, General, you were asked about Resolution 1199. We will deal with this and then we'll move on. The question is, who said that you were authorized to use force in this resolution, as was mentioned or discussed in this meeting that you had with the accused?
The content of the resolution is a matter of public record, and I was following the instructions from NATO and from my government.
Pa da li su ta uputstva koja ste vi imali
And these instructions that you had from NATO and your government, are they in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, General Clark, and are they in accordance with international law?
We're going well beyond the bounds of the witness's evidence now. We've heard the explanation of why the threat was issued to you.
Da li je vama poznato, gospodine May,
Do you know, Mr. May, that threats are also prohibited under the UN Charter? Threats issued to states.
No, let us move on.
General Clark,
General Clark,
pozvali ste se na ovaj dokument
you invoked this document
s nekakvim prizvukom da ja želim da izbegnem
trying to say that I was trying to evade a discussion about the content of the document because what was signed was actually only a record of the meeting, and the document is actually attached to this cover sheet, as you put it. But on the contrary, I don't want to avoid that. I want to quote the statement, and you invoked it, recognizing Resolution 1199 of the UN Security Council and proceeding from the fact that organized terrorism has been defeated in Kosmet and that all actions against terrorists have ceased as of September 29, 1998. The authorities of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia have decided, among other measures, to undertake a series of actions that would help further confidence building among citizens, members of all national communities living in Kosmet, as well as the resolution of all pending humanitarian problems, especially the speedy return to their homes of all displaced persons. These measures are undertaken with a clear view of ensuring the return to full normality of life as soon as possible throughout Kosmet, while continuing to secure the safety and well-being of all citizens and innocent civilians of Kosmet, and guaranteeing the right of all citizens, members of all national communities living in Kosovo and Metohija, to carry on their everyday life free from any threat and constraint, which includes full freedom of movement for all citizens and state authorities' representatives, as well as normal activity of all state organs. And then it says, in order to further encourage the return to peace and normality, and then it says, underlined in hand, the state authorities of the FIY will bring down the level of presence and the equipment of security forces, in parentheses MUP and VJ, throughout Kosmet to normal levels. And now I highlight this. To normal levels, i.e. to the levels preceding the outbreak of terrorist activities. So terrorist activities stopped and the forces are going back to normal levels, with the clear intention of creating conditions that would help the speedy resumption of the political process and resolution of all outstanding political and humanitarian issues. That is what is written here. And then it says further on, in this process, again, this is underlined, the process. The state authorities of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia are counting on the assistance and support of the OSCE Verification Mission and KDOM, the Kosovo Diplomatic Observation Mission, and international humanitarian and other organizations. And then the authorities announced the following measures. Number 1 through 6. But you're probably going to say that we didn't do some of this. So, 1, special police units deployed to Kosovo after February 1998 will be withdrawn from Kosovo. Combined special police strength in Kosovo will be reduced to their February 1998 duty level. Do you remember that it was stated then that there should be a total of 10,024 policemen? This figure remains imprinted in my memory. So that is the duty level of February 1998. Any additional heavy weapons, that is to say, brought in or transferred after February 1998 from 12.7 millimeter or above, or equipment brought into Kosovo or transferred from the VJ to the special police, will be withdrawn from Kosovo or returned to the Army of Yugoslavia. Item number 3, special police, will resume their normal peacetime activities. Heavy weapons and equipment remaining under MOP control.
We can read this, Mr. Milosevic. I haven't stopped you before, but we can all read it. What is it that you want to ask General Clark about here?
General Clark, is it clear that after the main threats by the terrorists in Kosovo and Metohija had been eliminated, the situation was brought back to the level prior to February 1998? And that in paragraph 5, which refers to the Army of Yugoslavia, it was implied that the Pristina Corps would continue normally to be in Kosovo, but that only 3 groups of company level would be positioned to secure certain directions and lines of communication. Was that how it was?
Your Honor, first of all, I want to just underscore that the statement is the statement of the FRI. It's not the statement of NATO. It was noted by General Naumann and me. We helped to work the specific provisions, but the terminologies and so forth that are in this, including the statement about terrorism and so forth, this is the wording of the government of FRI. As far as compliance is concerned, what we saw was partial but not complete compliance. For example, item number 2, heavy weapons or equipment brought into Kosovo or transfer from the VJ will be withdrawn or returned to the VJ. That was not the case. The heavy equipment that was given to the special police was not in every case pulled out of Kosovo or returned to the VJ. We did initially see the withdrawals of some police. There was no way to determine whether it was the full 4,000 that were required or not. And we then saw by mid-December the violation of the agreements about the deployments. And that started really about the same time that General Perisic was replaced as the chief of the Yugoslav military. And that additional deployment is the one that I mentioned in my testimony. It's the one that we noted that was north of Pristina. So that constituted a violation. And that's the one that I counseled General Ojdanic about in December.
General Clark, why are you linking up the replacement of General Perisic and the appointment of General Ojdanic with any increase of forces in Kosovo when the two have absolutely no connection? Who told you that? Where did you get that information from?
Your Honor, it's my impression that General Perisic was replaced as the commander because he wasn't fully supportive of the accused's policies of employing military forces against the population in Kosovo. And what we noted was that almost immediately after his replacement, the forces that were there began to deploy to the field and conduct actions in contravention to the promises made by the accused in this statement to NATO.
To vi tvrdite.
That is what you are claiming, and this statement was fully complied with. Are you claiming, General Clark, that this was complied with or that it was not complied with? Let us make things quite clear.
Your Honor, I am stating that by the middle of December, it was this statement, or the 20th of December, this statement was not being complied with. I'm not sure it was ever totally complied with, and that we believe that there still remained heavy weapons that had been transferred to the MOOP that had not been removed or given back to the VJ in accordance with this agreement. But that in addition, by the 20th or so of December, we had evidence that additional Serb military forces were being deployed and used against the population, against the terms of the agreement.
Dobro, je li do 20. decembra poštovano saopštenje?
Was the announcement complied with up to the 20th of December and not after that? Is that what you're saying, General?
Your Honor, I'm saying that the accused did not live up to the terms of his commitment to NATO.
Ovo su obaveze.
These are commitments in accordance with Resolution 1199.
Valjda to nije sporno.
Surely that is not in dispute, General Clark.
Je to sporno ili nije, generale?
Is it in dispute or not, General Clark?
This statement is the statement that General Naumann and I took back to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that detailed the actions that the accused and his forces would take in order to comply with 1199. And what I'm saying is that he did not live up to this commitment that I took back to NATO.
A odakle vam dokaz?
How do you know that it was not complied with? Where is the evidence? Are you saying that the commitment assumed was not complied with? There were no activities after that until you started spurring them on through Walker and others to start killing once again. Wasn't that so, General Clark?
That's incorrect. What actually happened after the agreement was signed in late October is that there was some brief period of diplomatic activity. The diplomatic activity didn't go anywhere for a variety of reasons. The change was made in the leadership of the Yugoslav military. In my view, a more compliant officer was put in place, General Ojdanic. The forces then began to move out again, and starting in mid-December, late December, we began to see the evidence that the campaign against the population in Kosovo was heating up. We saw increased numbers of forces moved in. We saw more tactical activities. We had reports from the Kosovo, the KDOM mission there, the Diplomatic Observer mission, that there was more action. And so it was an intensification of operations again, in contravention to the promises made to NATO.
Generale Clark,
General Clark,
jeste li vi sada u glavnom ispitivanju
during our examination in chief,
da ste imali
didn't you explain that you had a talk with General Ojdanic
i da ste ga pitali
and that you asked him
povećava
why the number of troops was being increased. You yourself said in the border area. Isn't that right? Isn't that what you said a moment ago? Surely I don't need to refer to the live note. You surely remember what you said 10 minutes ago if you don't remember what happened 5 years ago. You spoke to Ojdanic. Is that right?
Your Honor, I think the accused has confused two separate conversations. The first was my visit to Belgrade on or about 20 December, in which I met with General Ojdanic and Mr. Shinovich. And during that meeting, I went through this statement and reminded General Ojdanic of his obligations. I warned him that the deployment to the Podjevo area was out of bounds. I asked him to pull those forces back. I subsequently departed Belgrade. In early March, after the massacre at Raychok, after Rambouillet had commenced, there was a continuing buildup of forces and activities on the ground in Kosovo. I then called General Ojdanic and asked him to remove those additional forces that had been brought in. I asked him why he was building them up and so forth. And that's when he told me that he had brought them in, as I relayed in my previous testimony. So there are two separate conversations here, some 3 months apart.
Very well. And then he explained to you that the forces were going there because you were threatening to attack Yugoslavia. Isn't that so? And that the forces were on the border to defend the border. Is that what General Ojdanic told you?
General Ojdanic, Your Honor, did not tell me the forces were on the border. The forces were not on the border. The forces were arrayed around, generally against, deployed in such a way that they could take action against the population. They were not arrayed strictly for defense against a hypothetical NATO attack. I also told Ojdanic that such a defense would be unnecessary because NATO had no intention of invading Kosovo.
But all the time you were threatening with invasion. Is it true, General Clark, that as early as mid-1998 you had planned bombing of Yugoslavia, even though at the time you could not have?
No, you can ask the witness about the conversations. You know that.
Well, Mr. May, I really don't know when you're switching off my microphone, whenever I take the lead from what the witness himself has said. So, General Clark, you yourself mentioned just now that Ojdanic told you that your threats had provoked certain movement of our forces in order to be able effectively to protect the country's borders. Is that right or not?
Your Honor, what I recounted was in full detail the conversation, including the excuse given by General Ojdanic for deploying forces. And I also explained my discussion with Ojdanic. There was no threat from NATO at that time. There were no forces in Macedonia which would have warranted such a buildup in forces in Kosovo. And the forces that were in Kosovo were not deployed in defensive array against hypothetical NATO invasion. In any case, they were deployed in such a way that they could be used against the civilian population in Kosovo.
But those forces, General Clark, did not act against the population. Is that clear to you or not? Or are you perhaps claiming that they did act against the population?
Your Honor, when I move into this discussion, I'm going past the bounds of my original evidence. So I'm going to answer the question and then refer it to the court as to how far we go on this. But yes, those forces did move against the population. They began moving against the population on the 19th or 20th of March, as I stated.
Yes, that was part of your evidence, and that's as far as it's to be taken. No further. Or we get into the areas which the witness did not give evidence about, and it is not evidence from him. If you want to pursue these matters, you must pursue them with other people. So there's no misunderstanding. If you want to cross-examine the general on the book, you can on those parts which relate to his evidence, those parts which are marked. But at the moment that he's not been admitted, it hasn't been admitted, but we should not stop you cross-examining if you wanted to on those parts. But those are the only parts. Yes.
One point, I notice that the accused has not yet cross-examined on the contents of the conversation set out at paragraphs 3 and 4 in any detail. Now, they're very important paragraphs. I've suggested to him through the court that he'll also want to look at the material disclosed coming from the Tudjman transcripts. I know the normal rule is that if somebody doesn't cross-examine on something, that it's, as it were, taken at full value. This is something, of course, of such importance that if there is any suggestion of a nuance to that, that conversation, it would be in the accused's interest to put it, and it would help the chamber to have the issues joined now.
Yes, we will have that in mind. There are two conversations in particular, which I have noted in particular. One concerns Srebrenica, and the other one was the corroborative evidence of what General Naumann said about Drenica. Both of those could be relied on, or might be relied on, to support the accused's state of knowledge. Mr. Milosevic, you hear what's being said. No doubt you've got your own time and you've got your own plans. No doubt you will get round to challenging those, but if you do challenge them, you should do so clearly, so that a witness can deal with them, particularly matters of importance such as those. Now, we'll consider for a moment what time you should have in the morning.
Maybe just clear up something, because that is also probably part of the tactics of the opposing side. So I'm never supplied with materials on time. In my document it says General Wesley Clark was the supreme commander during the conflict in Kosovo, etc., etc. That is paragraph 3 in my documents. And paragraph 4, the witness will testify about his general observations regarding the style of government of Milosevic. So I don't know which paragraphs 3 and 4 you are referring to. Do you have another statement of the witness? Will you please give me a copy of that statement where those paragraphs appear? I have just quoted from paragraphs 3 and 4 in my document, the one that was disclosed to me. Microphone, Mr. President.
Sorry. Let me make one thing clear. The evidence is the evidence which this witness has given before the court. It is not in this case any statements and the like. You should have, and I hope you do have, the up-to-date witness statement. Has that been served upon the witness, the summary which you served last week?
The version last week was served, which was identical to the version that was served, I think, today or yesterday, served today, but for formatting differences. So there have been two versions of a 45-paragraph statement in 11 pages served on the accused, and that's been the basis for the testimony today. And the paragraph numbers are exactly the same for those two versions. So it's a 45-paragraph number, if I've got it right, that he's looking for. And he can find it possibly at the beginning of the bundle of exhibits, if he's been given that. But he's been supplied with 2 already.
But we're just thinking, we're considering. You've considered the position, and because you are in person, we shall not stick absolutely to the limit which we mentioned earlier today. What we'll do, having regard to how the cross-examination has gone, we will give you an hour and a half tomorrow morning to conclude your evidence, in the course of which you should, of course, bear in mind what the prosecution said and deal with those matters which are in dispute, those which deal with controversial matters. So you should prepare on that basis. At the moment, there's registry. Mr. Nice, there seems to be some difficulty about the transcript being provided to the provider, the government. I thought there was no difficulty about this at all. I thought the matter had all been arranged. But if...
Microphone, Mr. Nice, please.
They've got to have a copy, otherwise they can't review it.
Yes. Very well. That will be done.
Very much.
General Clerk, if you could be back, please, tomorrow at 9 o'clock to conclude your testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn.
All arise. We will obey.